welcome. This talk is about social mobile gaming, new path to AAA content. Really, it's a talk about how these new emerging platforms are affecting our industry, what's going on, and how this is going to change things for us going forward. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I know some of you, not all of you. I'm going to talk a little bit about social, mobile, traditional box retail, console, PC, and then sort of downward and upward innovation and what those things mean. So first, me. Undergrad, I was at Penn, dual degree engineering and economics, computer science, with the idea that someday I would have a game company, and it actually worked out that way. So that's pretty sweet for me. Then I went to Microsoft Game Studios after that. I started writing device drivers for DirectX. My background's pretty technical in nature. There I went to the game studio side. I worked on things like Rise of Nations, Counter-Strike, Munch's Odyssey, Xbox 360, Forza 2, Crimson Skies. Did everything from graphics, audio, networking, multiplayer, performance optimizations, and the list goes on and on. After that, I took a detour back to business school, went to Harvard. My career there at Microsoft, I thought, is it that I love the games industry because I was there for my entire career, or was it that I loved working with small game studios, because that was sort of the best times I had at Microsoft, was in the publishing studio working with the small dev shops that were actually building stuff. So after Harvard, I went to Lightspeed Ventures, where I did venture capital. We seeded a company called Casual Collective, which became Kixeye. We also worked with a company called Serious Business, which I board reserved, which ultimately got bought by Zynga. They did games like Friends for Sale on Facebook, one of the early Facebook game companies. We also looked at a company called Playdom, and we invested in that. And I met with the chairman, and he was like, "What are you doing there? You need to come help me run the product division here." So at first I said no. A couple months went by. And then I said yes. So I became VP of Product Development at Playdom, where I managed the destination site, the mobile division, QA, platform. I opened the San Francisco studio. I opened the Seattle studio. We took the company from about 50 to about 500 people before we sold to Disney. I also ran the monetization department. So it was like a very interesting sort of deep dive into what was going on with Facebook at the time, a very exciting time there. I also ran the mobile division there. Then I left right after after the Disney acquisition, and became CEO of Rivet Games, where we make games that basically bring IP to our customers, no matter what device or screen they're on. So we want to take IP and bring it to them and have a touch point with the customer, whether they're on the mobile device, their tablet, Facebook, open web, and ultimately back down to consoles and PCs. Social games. So Facebook. I don't think this guy's doing it right. So some interesting things about social games. A lot of people that have just done traditional sort of AAA quality games look at these things. They look at Farmville, they look at Mafia Wars, and they say, what the hell is this, right? This is the simplest possible thing ever. Meanwhile, in the console business and the PC business, we're solving problems like, how do I get this mesh procedurally generated so you don't see the rip and the animation when the guy's arm moves, right? These are very specific, complicated problems. So you look at these things, which look like games that were made, maybe in the early 90s or late 80s, and you say, why is this so hard? Well, that's just the front end that you see, right? And underneath the hood, you have all these back-end scaling problems in the cloud. These things are all hosted in the cloud. They have to be on a CDN. They have to be delivered in time. The analogous problem would be like a DVD layout on a console game. You have to deliver content to your customers within 15 seconds, or they're pretty much gone. They're very ADD. You have to sustain a daily content pipe where you're pushing out content constantly. It's a 24/7 grind. If you look at the rate at which content comes out for a lot of the games that are doing well on Facebook, it's sometimes every other day or even daily, which is, it can be taxing. There's this customer service support because it is a 24/7 global service and business. You have ops, live deploys, branching. The other piece here is really the analytics framework, and that's the thing that's really been interesting with Facebook. You can really think of yourself more as a pit boss at a casino versus a producer at a game studio, because you know exactly who's playing, when they're playing, what they're doing in your game when you're there, if you're tracking the stuff correctly and properly, what they're spending money on, when they're buying stuff, all this stuff. And so that's really powerful, right? Because as the thing's a live service, you can affect your hit ratio. The game can launch, it can be doing okay, but if you're getting this data and you're reacting in real time, you can actually look at where the customers like and provide more cowbell there, and then look at what they don't like and sort of, let's ignore that, right? And sort of move the game forward and make it successful. Some other challenges. So I say social gaming, but what I really mean is Facebook. right? Google Plus is launched, but remains to be seen if that's going to be successful. The problem with Facebook, from this chart you can see, which I got off of, I think it was developeranalytics.com, or you could get it off of appdata.com. Zynga is as large as the next, pretty much almost as large as the next 29 companies combined by daily active users. That's pretty huge. So there's a picture there of Zuckerberg and Pincus. And Pincus is the groom, and that's actually totally intentional, because he's the one driving the revenue for the Facebook platform. And as a result, I think Facebook is catering to Zynga. So when you look at the new changes and the new features that Facebook claims are dialing back up virality on the platform, look at like the real-time ticker. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. You may have seen that if you've been playing Facebook games. If 42% of the traffic by daily active users is Zynga, that means that at any given time, 42% of the stuff in that newsfeed is Zynga stuff. So that means it's basically a cross-promo bar back to Zynga. This is a discovery channel that's correlated positively with current footprint. That doesn't help discovery for the small guys, right? It helps you more the larger you are. So I talked to Sean Ryan at Facebook, and I was like, what are you going to do about this? You need to create a discovery channel that is either inversely correlated or not correlated with current footprint size. Something like the ratings in the iTunes store that induces churn, right? Because when you target an audience correctly, you target the people that are going to love the game, they give it a high rating, rises in the charts, thereby getting more distribution. People see it who aren't the core audience, they give it 4 stars or 3 stars, it naturally falls. They're actually going to be doing away with ratings. So this is actually kind of a bad sign for the platform, I think. Another side effect of this, you can see that the CPC rates, or cost per click, have gone up 74% across US, UK, France, and Germany, which are probably among the top best markets on the platform. And this is because you have a company like Zynga with a massive portfolio of games, and they're bidding for the same users that you are. You have one game, right? They have Cityville. It's not just the LTV of Cityville. It's not just what that customer's worth there. It's that plus the probability they will cross-promote to Frontierville times the LTV of Frontierville, plus the probability they'll cross-promote to Farmville times the LTV of Farmville. So in other words, they can actually bid more profitably than you can if you have one title. So in order to be successful here, you have to actually build titles that are better, more valuable, better executed, more targeted for customers that will really be engaged and pay more for that thing. It's hard to go broad. If you look at the soccer mom audience, the 30-plus females that everyone talks about on Facebook, competing with Zynga for that particular market is tough. It's not really clear yet, in my opinion, who's locked up the gamer audience on Facebook, and I don't think that any games have been delivered yet that are truly delightful to that audience, so I think there's an opening there. One thing that social gaming has done, it's really made free-to-play gaming in the West a big business. There have been companies like Area Games, IGG, and such, which have been taking games from Asia and bringing them here and operating them. These are like downloadable MMOs. But they haven't been large scale like Zynga has, right? And some of the other companies, like even EA now with PopCap and Playfish and The Sims Online, I'm sure they're making a lot of money off of that. So this really proves that in the West, not just in the Far East, the free-to-play model is viable and it works. So that's interesting, right? Facebook's also expanding our industry. There are people that are getting exposed to games who would not self-identify as gamers. These are people who do not own consoles, they do not consider themselves gamers in any way, yet they're playing Farmville and they're playing these things on Facebook. And they're not even sure that they don't realize it's a Zynga game. They just think it's a Facebook thing, right? But what happens is these people, as they play these things, they start getting bored and they start hungering for deeper and deeper experiences. Over time, I think this is going to expand our industry and be good for the games industry in general. Interesting thing here, right? Back to the free-to-play model. Some of these games make millions of dollars per day, right? My estimate, I would guess that poker, Cityville, things like this are making over in excess of $1 million a day. That's like hundreds of millions of dollars a year off of these games that you look at and you're like, these things are a joke, right? Compare it to like, Gears of War or something. You're like, what the hell's going on here? How could this make this much money, right? Which brings us to mobile. A lot of you recognize, imagine making games for that phone. Not so good. Whoa, I'm missing a slide here. Well, this slide, if it were here, was going to talk about fragmentation in the mobile industry. So you've got basically iPhone in the US this past June, looking at the install base, is about 30% of the mobile market. Android's about 41%, and you've got BlackBerry RIM with about 25%. So building games for mobile is tough if you want to hit the entire market, right? Some people say that iPhone's more valuable than Android. Not particularly clear if that's true, because I think Android has a lot more piracy problems, and so discovery is a problem for that platform. So free to play with microtransactions works, but if you're trying to sell something on Android, good luck. Which brings us to HTML5. Maybe this solves our problem, right? Another thing about the platforms is, there's all these versions of the OS on iPhone. On Android, you have many different OS versions and also different devices, different screens, different device hardware capabilities. This is really hard. It's kind of like building a game for Windows in the 90s where you're like, should I support Millennium? Hopefully my marketing guy tells me no, because it's a huge pain in my ass. Right? Hopefully I can just do XP and beyond. But you have to make that decision and figure out what you're going to target and do it appropriately. So people say, well, HTML5, I'll just write it in HTML5 and then I'm good, right? Well, there's a lot of red on that graph. In this chart, and the interesting thing here that took me is this one. CSS transforms 3D. Not good, right? So if you wanted to make a game that's pretty simple, like a 2D game, maybe even an isometric game, you could probably get away with doing it in HTML5, and it would probably work. It's not clear to me that enough people have built enough stuff on this to find out, well, what are all the idiosyncrasies and workarounds you need to do to make this really work well? And if you wanted to make something that's, the complexity of something you could do with Unity or with the Unreal Engine, I don't think it's going to happen so much. You'd probably have to plug this, do some of it in HTML5, and some people are using Flash, like Molehill, or Unity to sort of plug the inadequacies of the browser support for HTML5. So I don't really think this is going to be viable to see truly, engaging 3D high production value content until at least another year. But it depends when these browser guys get their act together. Another thing to think about is, imagine making an HTML5 game for the iPhone, right? Do you think that Apple's going to hurry to support this? This is the one thing that Safari's not supporting. Do you think they want an HTML5, or do you think they'd rather have you make a native app where they can collect money off of it? So we'll see what happens there. This is a snapshot of yesterday. These were the top apps, top grossing apps. So these are listed by how much money they made. Interestingly enough, you'll see Modern Combat's up there. Some other things you notice about this list right away, right? Where are the big brands? Where are the big game publishers, like your Activisions, your EAs and stuff? Poker's by Zynga, Crime City's by Funzio, Tabzoo is Pocket Gems, Texas Poker, I'm not sure who it is, Angry Birds is Rovio, and so these aren't really like massive, I think Modern Combat's Gameloft, so these aren't really like the massive traditional publishers. Also notice this, right, the price. Most of these things are free. All of these things support in-app purchases, so that's where they're making their money. Another thing here is I looked at this, and the one outlier would be Angry Birds Seasons, in that this is the last 9 months it's been consecutively in the top 20 out of 17. So what does this mean? They launched something. It wasn't a hit right away. It's an online service with microtransactions. They took the data they were getting out of it and made it into a hit that's a top grossing title. That's pretty fascinating to me, right? Angry Birds, traditional sort of hit-driven, launched it, it kicked ass out of the box, great, fantastic, good for them, hooray. Right? High Noon, the last 6 months it's been in the top grossing. It's 17 months old. That's also really interesting. That's exactly counterintuitive to everything you learn in box retail, right? Where you hold your breath on the first day, hopefully it's like Halo 3 and it makes $1 bajillion, and then it's just kind of downhill from there, right? Not the case here. Interesting, right? Smurfs Village, 11 of the last 12 months. Texas Poker, 10 of the last 15, and Tapzoo, 12 of the last 13. So these little companies are doing something that the large companies clearly aren't doing yet or don't know how to do yet. Interesting. So I thought to myself, well, 2 years ago, before the Angry Birds phenomenon, before Facebook started getting really rough with its virals and a lot of the indies started going to mobile, what was the environment like then? Interesting. Look at this stuff that's top grossing 22 months ago. They're all paid, not a single free app in the bunch. Almost half of them don't support microtransactions. All these things are branded titles, right? Pretty much most of them. Avatar, based on a movie. Call of Duty, big brand. Need for Speed, big brand. Tetris, obviously, the first thing to go anywhere anytime there's a new platform. Sims 3, the Madden, right? This is an outlier, but only spent 1 month in the top 10. And look at the amount of time they spent there, too. A lot of sort of 1 month things and down. Some of them spent, 12 of the last 24 months, 9, 11, 6. So times are changing, right? I mean, I think what happened was a lot of the people who were on Facebook, a lot of the indie guys, the Facebook environment got rough, started catering to Zynga. A lot of them moved to mobile, and they've seemed to have found a model that seems to work better than sort of the old model. Interesting. What are the takeaways here? Well, one of them is that's supposed to be risk cubed. So don't compound your risk. So what this means is, if you're going to build an app, but you're going to build a game, let's say, okay, I'm going to do this crazy design that no one's thought of before on mobile that may or may not work. And then I'm going to build it in HTML5 because that's new technology. And then I'm going to try a business model to monetize it. No, don't do that, right? Pick one. Because if you succeed or you fail, you're not going to know why, right? If you change everything at once. So try to take smart risks, and if you're going to do a crazy new design, try to build in tried and true technology. I think you'll just be better off and have a better result. Okay, what the hell does this mean? So the guy on the left, that's your game designer. This dude is your analytics guy. And so you either need both of these people, I think, to really be successful in sort of this new gaming space with connected devices and connected screens, or you need to find a guy who's kind of like both of them. This is really the central nervous system of your business, right? Like I've been talking about, getting the data back. You have all this rich data from your customers. You're able to target them effectively. You may target one group of customers, test with another group, and find it resonates better with them, switch, and then you're profitable. Fantastic, right? This is stuff that's really hard to do with box retail. And being agile, getting feedback in the system, having a design idea, having an argument about it with someone else in your team, test it, see what happens. It can't hurt, and if you're agile and you build stuff correctly and able to deploy stuff quickly and iterate fast, which really is what everybody should be trying to do, you can test it out and figure it out, and then there's no argument. This is a marathon, not a track meet. So this is a 24/7 grind. It's running a live service. It's monitoring data. It's monitoring ops. It is, like a lot of those games, like I said, 17 months ago, it was not in the top grossing. For the last 6 months, it's been in the top grossing. How do they do that? Grinding it out, getting data, getting feedback, trying different user acquisition groups, different user acquisition strategies, targeting different users, all this stuff. Really important to do. Here's one thing that maybe some people won't agree with, but I have a couple examples as to why I think this is true. Best is greater than first. I think that it's the best to market that wins. Remember, we're making entertainment. We're not making, some business app where someone has to use it, and so they just use the one that sucks the least, right? We're competing with people going running, people watching TV, people watching a trailer on YouTube. So best to market is going to capture people's attention. Look at the City games. Social City was the first one out. And as soon as Millionaire City came out, I remember being in the office, I played, I'm looking at it, and I said, man, this is going to eat our lunch. People said, oh, but the art's it's ugly. I said, yeah, it's not as pretty as Social City, but the mechanics are better. It's more fun. It's more engaging. There's more to do. There's more to think about. There's more strategy. Ultimately, it did overtake Social City. And then ultimately, at the end, Cityville came out with great mechanics, great execution, very fast iteration time on pushing new content and new stuff for users, and it had pretty art. And that ultimately is still the top-rating Facebook game, which brings me to my last point here. Ideas are a dime a dozen. It's execution that matters, always. And for this, it's even more so because it is a live service, it is a grind. You can affect your outcome after you shipped. So the person who's able to iterate quickly and execute effectively on their ideas is the one who's going to end up winning. I think that's just one of the biggest takeaways that I've found going from sort of box retail to social, mobile, and connected. Which brings us to this. There's our stereotypical console PC gamer, hanging out with a cigarette and playing some games. So what's going on in this industry, right? Here's the first three are examples of some of the biggest budget console titles there. Grand Theft Auto 4, $100 million to build, 4 years, maybe 5. About 1,000 people, that's like a small city, right, involved building that, and they've generated over $1 billion in revenue. Not bad, it's like a, 13x return over 4 years, amortize that, think about the IRR, pretty good. Spore, $80 million, 8 years, around 600 people involved with a $100 million return on that. That's rough, that's a big bet. That's an example of a publisher who just basically said, oh, let's do something innovative, we'll take a flyer on this, do something that no one's really done before. It didn't work out, and now they're like, damn, right? I wonder if they're gonna make an innovative bet like that on the space again, versus just doing something like a sequel where they can get this, or a sequel here where it's pretty much guaranteed you're gonna get this. Compare and contrast that with Cityville and Angry Birds, right? I estimate Cityville is about $2 million in less than a year to build with about 50 people. That's a 150x return. That's not bad. Angry Birds is like an order of magnitude higher than that. It's 140K, it's about 100,000 euros, I was reading last night, in a little less than a year with about 34 people involved. And that's generated between $70 and $100 million to date. That's a massive return as well. And not only have they generated a massive return, but they've created an IP, they've created a brand that have plush toys. They're going to be bringing it to the Wii and all kinds of stuff. So that's also really interesting, right? What's happening to our business? Well, our business is growing. Look at this. The overall sort of console PC business has grown 7% year over year. This is between 2009 and 2010. But something also interesting has been happening. Look at the sort of handheld console market, the handheld game market, if you will. This market has grown in size between 2009 and 2010, right? But Nintendo has actually shrunk, and PlayStation has shrunk as a percentage of overall. So iOS Android now take over 34% of this market. That's also interesting, right? What's happening to us, should we be making these games for iOS and Android? Are there certain classes of games that will only work on a PSP or a Nintendo DS? Will the next generation of phones be able to support the complex type of stuff that we're actually doing in the console PC business? Probably, at some point, right? I mean, you've already got Unreal Engine running in Flash. We've got Unreal Engine running on the iPhone. It's just a matter, I think, of a usability problem more than anything else. It's not really a hardware problem at this point. And getting the usability right and the input right in these devices, I think somebody's going to get it really right and then make it bigger here. So you're a studio, you have some IP. You can either take it downstream toward the cheaper, sort of easier platforms to build on, or you can try to innovate and go upstream. And we'll look at what those two things mean and how they work. So downward innovation. So you got guys at studios who are like, oh, okay, well, we'll just take our game. We've got this uber popular game on the PC or on console, and we'll just stuff it on Facebook, and people just share it virally, right? And it just grows, and we just make tons of money, right? Well, not so much, right? It used to be that way. Then Facebook clamped down its viral channels, and a bunch of things happened. And I can tell you right now, running a social gaming business, the single biggest line item in the cost structure is your customer acquisition cost. So paying to get customers, so you better have the analytics to know whether they're profitable or not. Otherwise, you could be throwing money down a giant hole. These really are apples to oranges, right? When you think about the type of games people play on the console and PC versus what they do on social and mobile, right? Social and mobile clearly is dominated by free-to-play. Console and PC today seem to be dominated by paying up front $60 for something, which is a much harder sell, right? Thinking back to the arcade business, I often wonder if arcade games, if they had been free to start and a quarter to continue, if they may have made more money doing that in retrospect. Interesting thing to think about, right? Look at the sessions on console and PC. They're very immersive, they're very involved. You're playing on your couch or on your home PC in your home office, or maybe that's on your TV if you get rid of cable and have Hulu or something. Social and mobile, they're short sessions. They often sneak them in at work. I can tell you, looking with the social game companies I've worked with, peak times are during the day, wherever time zone you're in. So people are playing this in the office. They're also played on the go if you're on a mobile device. You're on the Muni, you're commuting, maybe you're waiting for a train or something. Maybe you're in the can. It happens all the time, right? I can tell, when I get words with friends stuff from people, I'm like, oh yeah, nice. PC games are periodically updated, and the social mobile is a 24 live service grind. Even on mobile now, right? The games that are making money look more like the free-to-play Facebook games with different usability characteristics, but they really are connected in a live service grind. Console PC, nearly completely creatively driven, with the exception of MMOs that do have the ability to get constant metrics. Social mobile, analytics driven, I should say analytics augmented. You still need to come up with a creative product and a good product that targets your customers using your product sense, product intuition, and great design. But once it's live, you can actually get feedback into the system, which is super helpful, right? The console PC played on a TV or monitor, lots of screen real estate, nice stuff. UX is actually challenging on a mobile device. It's also challenging on Facebook if you're not in full screen mode, because you got all this crap around the edges, the whole frame and stuff, right? It's noisy, it's loud, you gotta keep people's attention. So they're not quite analogous. Here's some examples. You got Infamous. Sim Social is actually, I would say, kind of the outlier here, because when you think about it, I think that The Sims is probably one of those titles that should have been designed for a social network. It's just that social networks hadn't been invented yet when you think about the interactions between the characters and the avatars. So this is something that's awesome for them, right? You look at this. I'd rather play this on a big screen. Dragon Age, the production quality of this versus what's in the console. And the customers are introduced to the IP on the console. This is kind of a step down, but would they rather play this versus Mafia Wars? Probably. And probably if this thing were connected to your Xbox where you could get some advantage for the game you're really engaged with and really love at home, that's the opportunity to play it here. Same with Infamous, right? This looks much more like a typical Facebook game. And Madden, I think, is better experience on the couch too. So the punchline here is really, if your IP started on the console and that's where you captured your audience and got to love the title, bringing them downstream to something like this is probably better served as a marketing channel than a platform. Keep them engaged with the content, connect that content via Xbox Live to your console, and let them get some benefit for the game they really care about back home. Also use this to share, so if you're going to launch a game, maybe you can abate some of your marketing costs by distributing it and giving them some experience or some teaser or some early item through Facebook or through a mobile device. That's my advice. Interesting little side note here. Why wasn't this on Facebook? Any of you guys play Assassin's Creed Brotherhood? Yeah? A couple of you? Okay. So this is a screenshot. You go to this Pigeons and you build up this kind of team of assassins. And you send them on missions, and it's basically time-based re-engagement, like planting the rutabaga in Farmville. Come back in 20 minutes, see if it worked or not, right? And then you level them up and grind it out. I always thought to myself, I don't want to do this on my couch. I wish they put this on Facebook, and then when I was at work, trying to dodge doing work, I could actually do some things, check in, boom, and then if it connected back to the Xbox, then I would get some benefit in my avatar that I had there. That'd be great, right? Then I could be sort of engaged with the content at every screen and every device along the way. Thereby, if you are marketing an IP, you're keeping your users' attention. You don't want to lose them to Angry Birds when they go to work because it's on their mobile device, and then they get super engaged with that. They forget about your game, which in traditional box retail, once you've sold it, you don't really care. But nowadays, with Xbox Live, PS Home, PS3 Home, you can push new content and live updates. So you want to keep them engaged with this content. And that's sort of how our industry is changing, I think. So innovation in the old games biz. You may be at a company, you may be working on big budget titles, you have a great idea for this game. Pigs, chickens, they steal the eggs. This is awesome, right? And this is what management will probably tell you if they're going to have to invest $80 million to build something. They're not going to invest in some wacky birds and chickens. They're going to say, shut your pie hole and go make Halo 5. And I don't want to hear you complain about it, And that's what happens to the customers, right? They say, there's too much sequels, we're in sequel hell, I'm going to do something else, right? I don't want to play version 10 of this thing. So on to upward innovation. What does this mean? What do we do, right? And let me stress, this is not about building game mechanics. It's about building IP, which is building IP and themes and content, right? This is one of the risks you take. There's like technical risk, design and product risk, business model risk, and sort of theme IP risk. You can abate IP risk by doing this. So you basically want to develop an IP on mobile and social. Angry Birds, right, is developed on mobile, but now it's a huge brand. They can probably take that anywhere and even put a different game mechanic on it if they wanted to, and it would probably still be successful because it resonates with an audience, right? So this is what I think it looks like. Start off, it's kind of like investing in venture capital. And when I was doing venture capital for that year, this kind of started brewing in my head and really, started resonating with me, which is like, invest a little bit, enough money to turn over the next card to see if it's going to be successful. If it's successful, move on to the next largest investment you can do. Make some test ad campaigns. Have your designer sit down with your designer. Think of some one-pagers, some ideas, some themes maybe that you want to explore. Mock up some ads, test them, see what the clicks are. If nobody clicks on it, either you're targeting the wrong audience or it's probably a bad idea, that nobody wants that theme, right? If you get success there, make some prototypes. Have some people come in, look at them, play them, see how they feel, see if it resonates, see what they like, see what they don't like. That's pretty cheap, especially if it's for a mobile or social game. It's cheaper to build a prototype than build the whole thing, right? Then build a mobile social game. Market it to the right audience. Capture them, capture their interest, capture their imagination with the IP you've developed, right? If you've done that successfully, then make an $80, $100 million investment in building a console game. At the very least at that point, if you take an engine like Unreal, you don't really have much technical risk, it's shipped on multiple titles, it's done. You have this theme that resonates, and you know exactly who it resonates with because you have all the demographic data on these people. So you know which audience it is, right? So your chances of success, and the biggest thing that large studios worry about is their hit ratio, right? I think you can affect your hit ratio positively. It's almost like counting cards in blackjack. Right? And if that goes well, I think back in the day when I first got into the games biz, we used to make kind of crappy games based on okay movies, and now we make crappy movies based on awesome games. Like Tomb Raider, a lot of these things. So then you can actually move upstream, sell your IP, own the IP that you've created. You can make I'm sure they could probably make an Angry Birds cartoon or movie right now. And then you got plush toys and all that other nonsense, and that's sort of, I think, how you get to be more successful with these large investments over time. Here's the examples. Fruit Ninja. Again, with Kinect, I think there's a lot of parallels between swiping on a phone and what you can do with Kinect. So I think you'll see a lot of iPhone games that are popular and resonate, potentially coming over to Xbox Kinect, and even with the Wii with the controller. Angry Birds is bringing this for console, right? Does anyone think that's not going to be successful? All they have to do is execute on it, right? Just don't screw it up. And then here's some examples of some people seeing the farm success with Farmville and Farmtown, and then bringing all this crap over to the DS, right? I'm not sure the sales numbers on those, but at least people are starting to think that way. PopCap's always been good at this, in my opinion, right? Plants vs. Zombies exists pretty much in every platform. It's in Asia now. Xbox 360 here, Xbox Arcade's got Bejeweled, all that stuff. So they're really good at pushing their content between these things. And I think that publishing in the future is going to look a lot more like this than it has been in the past. So here's an example from another industry. We've seen this movie before. What is this all about? Marvel doesn't make a movie and a huge investment and then decide to make a comic book out of it afterwards, right? There's 9,000 plus characters in the Marvel universe. There have been 36 films that generated over $4 billion in revenue, starring only 15 of those 9,000 plus characters. They know which ones to make movies on because they've tested it out in a cheap medium first. Same with DC, right? 11,000 plus characters, 25 films starring only 8 characters, and most of them are Batman or Superman. It's like a Green Lantern thrown in, right? 2.5 billion in revenue. That also doesn't count the 24 additional animated films on 7 of those 8 characters. But again, making a big bet, high production value, 4 Oscars won, 16 additional Oscars nominated. Not bad, right? So what's next? Well, consoles are connected. I think it's going to become even more so because as developers cry out for, I think they want digital distribution. You got companies like GameStop that really hurt developers, right? They'll buy your game for $5, sell it for 55 instead of 60, and they keep all of that, right? So you can't really do that in a connected game with microtransactions. So I think it's good for the developers, it's good for the development community if we can have connected consoles, and even the free-to-play model. And I hope some people will be testing that out soon. Also, what does publishing mean in that environment, right? Publishing traditionally meant you go to Nintendo, Microsoft, Sony, whoever, EA. They get you shelf space on Walmart. They provide some marketing spend for you and stuff. They give you a royalty advance because it's a big budget title. But what does it look like in the future? I think these titles that take 8 years to make, you can probably only spend 2 years now, deliver it, and if there's digital distribution, run it as a live service and make augmentations and adjustments on the fly, and then adjust your design as you go and give people more cowbell where they like it and less where they don't. That's also good for the console business. They don't have to make a huge investment up front. Also, I think the publishers need to provide an analytics framework for the developers to actually be able to manage their business effectively. I don't know of anybody that does this now. Even now in the social game business, they say, publishers like EA, Six Waves, Lol Apps, say, great, we'll publish your game. What does that mean? We own the cross-promo space around your app, which is really the value of abating customer acquisition cost. We'll give some marketing spend, and we'll take 60%. You get 40% net of Facebook. What the hell is that? And by the way, go pay Contingent or some other company to 10 grand a month to have an analytics framework. I think that should be provided by the publisher. And I think the publishing model for how we do publishing is going to change. And so that's really interesting to me as well. And that's about it. So I tried to leave a bunch of time for questions. I know there's a lot here. Happy to answer anything you guys want to talk about, if it's on anything, actually. So.